Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the organization panel 3 for the Elevate Review panel. My name is Jesus Pantel. I am the Cultural Funding Supervisor. Running slides, we have Maya Williams-Britton, Cultural Funding Specialist in the Cultural Arts Division in the Economic Development Department for the City of Austin. We also have Rachel Osgood from the Long Center helping with tech support. And then we've got Surabi Kuke as our outside equity facilitator, making sure that both the panelists and myself are keeping equity top of mind and centered in our new pilot programs here for Elevate. Again, this is organization panel 3. So this is our third set of organization panels. This is for nonprofit organizations with budgets under $43,000. The panelists have reviewed all of the applications prior to today and have tentatively made scores and comments on them. They may change their scores during the session, but are not required to based on feedback from their fellow panelists. And they will finalize their scores as we do each application. We have a 10-minute max for each application. I will be timing it. If we run into any technical issues, we will be sure to pause the timer so that way you get the full 10 minutes allotted for your review. If we do get close to the 10 minutes, I'll give a 3-minute warning, a 2-minute warning, a 1-minute warning, and then 30 seconds will be kind of like a fist. And then I'll do a countdown from 10. And then once we reach, the 10-minute mark, we will stop commenting on that application, and the application review will be done for that particular application. We have asked the panelists not to repeat any comments that have been previously said. If you notice, if it seems like you aren't getting that many comments, it's we've asked them only to provide new comments, not anything that has already been said. We are not scoring on consensus, so panelists can have totally different takes on the application, and that's fine. The panelists are not trying to persuade their fellow panelists to come to their score, but again, they can provide information that may or may not change their fellow panelists' scores. We do allow firsthand experience. The panelists may have looked at your website. They were not required to do so unless it was listed in your work sample, but they can take that into consideration when they are scoring your application. We ask that their comments align with the review criteria. They are not announcing a numeric score, but they will provide overall application comments. And they should again, make sure it aligns with the review criteria and should not base their scores on information not listed in the rubric, unless, again, they have personal firsthand experience or they have visited your website to get more information. We have also asked the panelists to look beyond grantsmanship to the extent possible. If they had to hunt for the information, we do ask that they mention that, but if they were able to find it, then they should consider that and score appropriately because they were able to find the information. We do not have any panelists with conflict of interest, so I will not worry about talking about that. And so that is it, and we are ready to begin. The first application up for review is in the Due of Little Things. Richard and Vale are our primary and secondary, and the timer will not start until Richard starts giving his commentary. And you are muted, Richard. And so again, the timer will not start till Richard is unmuted and giving the commentary.
I will never remember that, so I apologize. So first of all, I want to thank the City of Austin and Jesus for all and Maya for doing all this work. And what a great set of groups that have come in. I'm going to start with in the Due of Little Things. They had to be created during the winter storm to go and help poor communities be able to survive, be able to get those fundamental food and shelter and items like that. If you look at all of the categories in their purpose and their functions, it is just a great organization. Here is my concern, is it has not much to do with the arts. We have a lot of arts group out there that needs money, and this seems to be a social services organization that I hope it applies for grants in the social services sector, because it definitely warrants it. In this particular space, it was weak in regards to its contribution of cultural arts. So that is my concern regarding this particular space. We are the cultural arts funding, and there was my biggest concern. So that is my general analysis.
Thank you, Richard. Secondary, Vale?
Yeah, so I think the organization had a very clear mission that was rooted in serving individuals experiencing homelessness, which I think is a group that is disproportionately inclusive of groups that are at risk of cultural erasure and displacement within Austin, and have experienced other forms of institutional marginalization, which I know is a big priority for this grants program. At times I found that the application was really focused more on like general environmentalism, as opposed to serving those groups specifically. And I did think that in the cultural activities section, it could have used just some more detail about the kind of work that they're doing. I did check out the website and found some more details there, which was really helpful. But I think having that more explicitly in the application would have just helped me put that all together a bit more.
Do any of the other panelists have feedback on this application? Go ahead, Emily.
I was also finding that this application is a great area. Like on one hand, I was like, oh, this is such an incredible example how artists can be utilized in other sectors to, rebuild the infrastructure of our communities. And so, in that plane, I was like, oh, this is an artistic practice. I just wish that was more the argument was made more in that grant. But I also teeter-tottered between, what kind of organization is this? And I don't know. So I was just stuck, like, it's beautiful work. But I also felt I was stuck in a gray area of what this organization, is this a cultural project or is this a social services project?
Thank you. Others?
Can I go?
Yeah, go ahead. I didn't know if there was a hand up. Okay, great. Yes.
Yeah, at the risk of not repeating everything that's been said, I did appreciate the history of cultural art practices that had sort of that eco environmental focus to it, and also, the practical functioning of art as it can serve homelessness, I think is a really interesting intersection for cultural arts. I guess I also think about what they're funding is this mobile and native seed library. So thinking about how artists can check out tools for their practice, especially artists that are experiencing homelessness. So I think that while it's not necessarily going specifically to artists or a specific art project, I think that it is attempting to include those who experience marginalization in the practice of art where they might not be able to afford it. So yeah, it's kind of, I don't want to say back end, but kind of like a, the back of house things that we do need to support our artists in a more inclusive way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. invite any others who want to share their voice in this.
Well, panelists are seeing if they have any new additional comments that have not been repeated. I do want to clarify that staff has done a preliminary eligibility review just to look to see how they answered the eligibility questions, but have not looked in depth. It is an eligibility requirement that the applicant be a 501c nonprofit arts organization. With that being said, arts service is fine. It doesn't necessarily need to be performing arts or artistic activities. If it's a service organization, that is fine. Again, staff has not looked deeply at these applications, just a preliminary overview. So both clarification for the applicant if they're watching live or in the recording, or for the rest of the panelists while you are deciding your scores. We have about 3.5 minutes left. Any additional comments for this application? Seeing as there are none.
Well, can I lift up one thing?
Sudhabi, yes.
Just as you all are finalizing your own scores and thinking through this, remember that some of the guidelines, the priorities for like evaluating, does invite us to dig into intersectionality and the way that these overlapping experiences of artist and unhoused or race or anything, attending to those realities that people experience is a factor. So just to remind you that this is one element of the sort of priority guidelines for this grant under cultural and social impact.
Thank you for that, Sudhabi. Lee, yes.
To that point, the one I think maybe additional thing that I can offer is more to just feedback for the application itself, because I feel like the point that Sudhabi just made, that Vail also made about the intersectionality and kind of the underlying conditions of the constituency that they are serving, that is present, but I don't think it was articulated as explicitly in the application that would have helped the application to be stronger in this particular context.
Thank you for that, Lee. Any additional comments from the panel? If there are none, please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so by just giving a thumbs up so I know that you have finalized your scores for this application. Sarah, Vail, Lee, Taylor. Lee, I saw yours. Thank you. And we'll move on to the next application after Emily. Yes.
I'm so sorry. I'm having a tech issue where I can't get in, where I get in the portal and I can't adjust my application, that it comes up as a whole new thing, but I guess I'll just try. So I'll need like 1 more minute.
Sure. Yes, that's why we have time in between so you can finalize your scores. Richard, have you been able to finalize your score?
Yeah, I mean, my original scores are there, right? In other words, I didn't change them.
Okay, yeah, if you don't need to change your scores, then that's fine.
Okay, and I also am going to warn you that sometimes my screen freezes, so I don't know. It just froze, so I don't know if that's in coordination with what happened with Emily. So if I'm just sitting there blank, it's because my screen froze.
Okay, thank you for that. And if it freezes while you are giving your comments, again, a reminder that we'll pause the timer.
Taylor has a question in the chat. Just want to lift that up.
Yeah, just administratively, is this the last opportunity for us to finalize our scores?
You want to finalize your scores before we move on to the next application, but if you need to, if you're having problems in portal and you know what your score is going to be, you can do that afterwards, but you don't want to So when I say finalize your scores, it's you want to determine what your score is going to be for this application, but if you need time to move that from maybe your notebook or what you have written down to put it into portal, you will have some time to do that.
Okay.
I'm so sorry to ask what I promise I won't. There's something I'm not following. I'm going to my application, it says edit score, and then it opens a whole new thing. So I can't see what the scores or any of the comments. Like what am I missing here? I just want to.
As far as I know, that should allow you to do that. Did you have, I know we had sent out a spreadsheet as well for scores and comments. Do you have that?
I have that. Should I just adjust it in that?
You can adjust it in that. And so that way, at the end of the day or at lunch, or, you can finalize those scores, make sure that we can make sure that they're the same in portal. You can put them in a portal and we can work with making sure you get access to that. But if you have it in that spreadsheet, we can do it.
All right, thank you. I'll do that right now.
Okay, great. And just let us know when you're ready, Emily, and we will wait to move on to the next application until that is done.
I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. So next application up for review is Texas Nafas. Sarah and Vale are our primary and secondary. And Sarah, whenever you're ready to begin, the timer will start when you start giving your commentary.
Okay, good morning. I reviewed Texas Nafas. This organization has applied for their series of poetry shows, which are also broadcast on Access Television. They bring poetry to new audiences through television, create educational videos to increase the understanding of poetry and bring poetry to life through exciting performances. I'm quoting them. And it says, "Our work honors excellence in the poetry of all cultures." They have a history of the organization's been around for probably 20 years, it seems like, and they have been at it for a while. However, in this application and for this grant opportunity, it is unclear to me if their mission was originally, if their organization was originally formed to focus on marginalized communities, and or if that is who their original or even current key constituencies are, because their mission is to bring poetry to a wider audience. It's unclear if their current key constituencies are what this grant opportunity is looking at. And so in that, I'm also unsure of what communities they are serving that exemplify intersectionality based on their application. And then on accessibility, I believe it was language accessibility they also are not focusing on for this series of projects. And so overall, I took off points for several items because I felt like the application lacked clarity in those answers. I did look at their website, but there were no work samples, and the budget as well had some confusion on my part as to how the request for funding was being used. So.
Thank you, Sarah. Vail?
Yeah, I agree with Sarah. I think that there didn't seem to be a focus on serving the key constituencies, sorry, that the city of Austin has identified for this grant program. I also just think in general, there could have been a lot more detail around this proposal to provide some more insight. And I was also confused by some of the budget information since it looked like the organization was founded in like 1989, but was missing some fiscal year information on the budget form. And there were some other funds that were unaccounted for with how they would use it moving forward with the project if they got funding.
Any other panelists that would like to offer perspectives on this application?
I can say that I agree with what both Sarah and Vail shared, and also just was excited by the work that they're doing. Like, it seems like really cool work and really valuable work, and just for the purposes of an application, for this application and an application, I think additional detail would have made it clearer if their work really aligns in mission with this grant.
Emily, I see your hand.
I was really concerned about the leadership of the organization. It seemed that it's funded by one person who was also leading the charge. I don't know anything about the board members. It feels like everything is just on the founder. And, you know, I don't know who the whole community, I wish in the application that I would have more detail about the artists involved and more detail about the volunteers and who else is driving the ship. It just seemed very founder driven, which was a red flag to me, and also unsustainable.
Thank you, Emily. Other thoughts, feedback?
If there are no additional comments from the panel, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Vail? Emily, Richard, Lee? Sarah? And Taylor, thank you. Next application up for review is unlisted projects. Richard and Emily are our primary and secondary. And Richard, whenever you're ready to begin.
Unlisted projects, they host local and international artists and social leaders through their residency program over in East Austin, which I think is a very interesting concept. They've been around for 9 years. That's important. I ran a group called Invest in Texas, and where you had startups. Well, we match startups with investors, with venture capital. And the key there, we do anything from 5,000 to $100 million, but it was business, but I transcended to cultural arts funding to these groups. So it's important that they've been around for 9 years, because what you do is when you fund, your first priority is who or what, and then what their project is. So the 9 years of service is always a good sign. They've got a noble mission, but I noticed what I didn't see really any names behind this group. I need to know who's behind this financial investment. They have an internal collaboration, which is inherent in the program. They host 55 artists and they've produced 68 programs, and according to them, 20,000 visitors. That collaboration, especially with international music culture, is not only necessary, but timely as this world becomes smaller. One of the things is their inclusion was very, very significant, with the 85% BIPOC, 29% LGBTQIA, their working group, that was very inclusive. That was very impressive. They established a clear goal to establish community relationships, which you have to if you're going to go do public performances, and also doing business community relationships helps private funding. You always want to do that. They do a good job in opportunity creation. One of the things is supporting 35 artists. That confines the outreach. It's just that their funding can only get so many artists. I totally understand it. This is of the city. I wish they had more ability to host many more of those musicians. That was my only concern, as 35 musicians and artists in the city of Austin confines them to a noble goal and mission.
Thank you, Richard. Secondary, Emily?
Hey, it's a little hard to access my notes, so I just apologize ahead of time. But I absolutely was blown away by this application and this project. And what I really enjoyed, the performing arts ecosystem has such a track record of being transactional. And I felt that this organization really was going about the work in a transformational way. What I liked about the residencies was this pre-planning time that they had, where they're working with artists 6 months ahead of time to really bring in community and bring in partners in a way where everyone feels like they're co-creating the experience. This is also, there is a international performing arts ecosystem, and I think this is really great that international artists are coming here, but also it's great for local artists to start creating these exchanges, and helping local artists build these relationships will, long-term help local artists stay in Austin and sustain their careers, because they'll have opportunities outside of the city. I put a note in here that they have childcare stipends with their residency, and I think that is fantastic. Not only are they doing the work and the programming and the curation in an intentional way, but also just how they're structuring their organization. It just seems like non-hierarchical and collaborative, and I think the more investment from the city, they definitely are doing the work and are worthy of an investment.
Other thoughts, other panelists, any reflections on this? Go ahead, Sarah. I'm sorry, yeah, Sarah.
Yeah, I just wanted to agree. The only, I gave this applicant a high score, and the only area that I took off points was in leadership, because there is a breakdown of the board in the answer in the application. But when I went to the website, there is no part of their website that shows the board, and there is no attachment that shows the board. So they do answer the question and there's a thorough breakdown, but I just couldn't find any supplemental materials for that part of leadership.
Thank you. Other reflections? I do want to lift up one of the, I know this is a phrase you all have read a lot in the evaluation criteria or the priorities of the Elevate grant, that we're talking about prioritizing community groups that are at immediate risk of cultural erasure and displacement within Austin, and or have been institutionally marginalized and underfunded by the city. Just to kind of lift that to the conversation as well. As you're thinking about it.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, yes.
Just jumping in. I just wanted to say, I also really appreciated how much this application really highlighted and commented on how they're addressing intersectionality. It felt like a very big priority for them. So just wanted to flag that.
Great.
Any further comments from the panel? If there are no further comments, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Lee, Sarah, Taylor, Vale, Richard, Emily. All right, next application up for review is Beertoven Inc. Sarah and Richard are our primary and secondary. And Sarah, whenever you're ready to begin.
Okay, Beertoven is applying for their 10th annual performance season, which is a concert series of 5 concerts. And just to refresh memories, their mission is to create experiences with classical music that enrich the community through down-to-earth means. They break down social, economic, and formal barriers to accessing classical music in order to welcome in the most diverse portion of their community possible. I thought this was a good application, and I gave them fairly high scores. Their support letters state that they prioritize artists, which is always good to hear. And they had work samples showing their previous work. And let's see if I have anything else in my notes. Just a couple of tiny details as it relates to what we're scoring on is there wasn't a lot of mention of tourism, which is a small piece of this grant. And there was some marketing details that were unclear, but again, that was just minor deductions I made. And then yeah, overall, I gave fairly high scores. In their history of service, I did find it interesting that they were founded with the Sagrande Hall here in Austin, which was a historic German club. So I think I would deduce from that that their original founding has evolved to be more inclusive. And so, yeah, I just wanted to note that I thought it was an interesting part of their founding that they have broadened their mission and their outreach since those origins. That's all I have.
Thank you, Sarah. Richard?
Well, I like the whole concept of taking classical music in areas that you wouldn't think would be is I think it's a great idea. We need to continue to carry classical music to all communities, all areas, all sectors. The fact they've been here for 9 years is shows dedication. They have, individual artists involved. Oh, okay. They have the individual artists. They get to choose and develop their program. So getting all the artists together is good. So it's not controlled by one person or one board. That's always significant because it makes the performers who want to be there, makes them feel part of the whole program. They're trying to go out and play in different places, which is good. It makes a good community outreach. So I really liked their the whole concept. I guess the only thing they need to continue to do a better job of, broadening out to all communities, but I was very impressed with them.
Great. Other thoughts? Any other panelists?
If there are no additional, oh, Lee,
I
yes, go
think
ahead.
Lee had a hand, or Taylor maybe, no.
I was, just gonna say briefly that, I agree with the strengths of this application that were laid out. The couple questions that I had were really just around like, what were their priorities? Like, it feels like cultural diversity is reflected in their artists and in their kind of like selection of works. It wasn't clear to me that that was like that beyond diversity, that equity itself was a particular priority. And so, to a degree, that's, like, where does that line lay? And I think that because of the emphasis of this grant, it's worth considering how, like, not just like who they're engaging, but like how and why and what is kind of the drive and purpose for this particular group.
Thank you for lifting that up. Other thoughts?
If there are no further comments from the panelists, new comments that have not already been stated, seeing as there are none, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Vale, Sarah, Lee, Taylor, Richard, Emily. All right, the next application up for review is the House of Songs. Taylor and Lee are our primary and secondary. And Taylor, whenever you're ready to begin.
So the House of Songs is a opportunity for musicians to participate in a songwriting residency and songwriting intensive summit. There's also an opportunity for them to showcase their work at a showcase in Austin. It's a house the retreat house where they do all of their songwriting summits and residencies is in the Austin area. They mentioned Austin Round Rock area. I thought that, this application mentioned a lot of great opportunities for musicians to be paid, especially emerging musicians, to sort of develop their their catalog with music professionals and like have access to studio spaces to record these songs, and also an opportunity to showcase that work while being paid to do so. So supportive emerging artists. I would have liked to see in this application more proof that this group was actually interacting with the communities that their key constituencies that they mentioned, which were BIPOC, LGBTQAI, and low income communities. I thought that these were mentioned and they responded to the questions, you know, sort of these are our key constituencies. But I just would have liked to see more proof in their actual participation in this organization, and how they are sort of, you know, sort of what tactics are they using to really prioritize these groups. I did think that they had a very diverse kind of cultural leadership that had a lot of experience in Austin. And yeah, leave it there.
Thank you, Taylor. Secondary, Lee?
Yeah, I agree. I thought that this was an exciting, very Austin feeling experience for artists to be a part of, really kind of capitalizing on the long history of music in Austin, and then inviting people into that opportunity. So to me, it felt like there was some emphasis on class and like trying to bring in folks who often don't have access from a class perspective or economic perspective. And I would have liked to see just a little bit more alignment with some of the priorities of this grant along the lines of disability. You know, they mentioned that they work in venues with wheelchair access, but that feels pretty standard and just like ADA compliance. And you know, like I think they mentioned offering some concerts in other languages, but again, that didn't feel like it was connected to wanting to reach broader audiences, or a commitment to ESL in particular. Wasn't like the programming was in other languages, like the program itself or any of the outreach. And I felt like some of the plans for programmatic outreach were a little bit vague. So I think it was a strong like body of work that they're presenting, and in terms of connecting it with the goals of this grant, I felt like there was some room for growth.
Okay. Oh, I see hands. Richard and then Emily.
The founder, Troy, he's been around for years. He was the lead singer in Loose Diamonds 20, 30 years ago when I was playing on 6th Street, and was really a driving force in the music community, you know, coming to the live music capital of the world. So he has some really solid credentials. And then, you know, he played for our Songwriter Series internet TV show and demonstrated through the years his commitment. So when I saw this is what he has created, it is a culmination of all these decades that Troy has done for the music community. And then being a songwriter, having a much more sophisticated kind of collaborative group, it made me feel good, because yes, you have your songwriters group, you get together, but this seems much more of a collaborative and professional group. So I was very excited to see that Troy is still out there contributing to the Austin music scene as he has for 30 years.
Emily?
I hate that I'm gonna go in another direction. I just feel uncomfortable that this application is in consideration, because when you go to their website and when you go to their social media, you know, I don't live too far from Fayetteville. And so my impression over the past couple of years is that this has become a Fayetteville organization and not an Austin, Texas organization. You know, so the founder and ED is based in Fayetteville. Like, I want to know what programming has been happening in Austin for the past couple of years, because it feels, you know, I feel like we're in a gray area, and I don't, you know, I left Austin and I still work with Austin artists, but I'm based in another community, and I don't ask for the city of Austin funding. So I'm trying to just get an understanding of how this is uplifting the communities the creative community in Austin, Texas? Are we investing in an Austin project, or are we investing in Arkansas project? So I just, sit in discomfort.
Thank you, Emily.
Jesus, and so to be kind of on a practical standpoint, like, does it make sense to engage Emily's discomfort, or like, does it make, like, should we just kind of let everybody voice their own feelings about things?
No, we do not work on consensus, so, and we've got 3 minutes left. And so if someone has different feelings, that's fine. What I will say is, staff has tentatively or has done a preliminary review of eligibility. If organization, they can have, they need to be based in Austin, and we only fund activities that happen in Austin. But if they have activities that happen elsewhere, that's fine. We would only fund Austin activities, but they do need to be based in here. So if this application were to score high enough to receive funding, before we entered into contract, we would look to make sure that they met all eligibility requirements. Just over 2 minutes left. If Lee, you have other comments, or if other panelists have additional comments.
I guess I would just say briefly that it sounds like Emily may have more direct experience with them than I do. I don't know this group besides reviewing the application. So I'm just going off of their website and application, in which they list and like show to their space in Austin as well as in Arkansas. So it may, it may be the case that they have a bigger presence in Arkansas, but it does seem sincere in their website and materials that they do have some location in Austin, even if that's not the emphasis of their either social, like visible presence, or their work. Even it seems like there is some presence there.
Thank you for that. So yes, again, if they do have Austin area activities, that is fine. And bringing in, your outside perspective, if someone is familiar with their work, that is fine. Other comments from the panel? Just over a minute left, if there are any additional comments from the panelists. Seeing as there are no further comments, Taylor, your camera went off, so I don't know if you're still there. But if there are no further comments from the panel.
Sorry, I had to use the restroom.
Okay, no, you're good. All right, if you would please finalize your scores then, and let me know when you have done so. Sarah, Taylor, Richard, Vale, Lee, and Emily. All right, and our next application up for review is SoCo Women's Chorus. Sarah and Richard are our primary and secondary. And Sarah, whenever you're ready to begin.
Okay, SoCo Women's Chorus is applying for 2 concerts that they plan to produce in the upcoming year, and they provide Central Texas women with the experience of musical artistry and excellence through choral singing and group performances. On this application for this grant, there was several areas that I took off points. So overall gave them sort of like a medium score as far as our scoring rubric goes, because in the answers to certain areas, I just felt it was a bit vague in cultural relevance and intersectionality. I just wish there would have been some more background in their answer on this application. I think that's all the notes I have.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Secondary, Richard? Oh, and you're muted, Richard.
Muted.
See, I warned you. Let me go back to my notes. So they have about 50 women who like to perform worldwide music. I like that they try to get as many singers in. In Austin, there's sometimes can be difficult to, get your singing in. So I do like the fact that they give that opportunity and create that opportunity. I like that. They seem to do all sorts of genres, therefore bringing in all sorts of audiences. They have, a solid record, 2012. That's good. That shows they're committed. I like the fact that they bring in the community in music. I've learned over the years they can be very controlling from, a musical director or the leader. So I like that they, invite that community feedback so they know what people want to hear. They do 2 concerts a year and they try to do 2 different genres. That's good. They try to, perform throughout the community. And it's women singers only, so it's inherent, it's just women, but that's their mission. So, and they do songs in different languages, and so that is kind of my analysis.
Okay, thank you. Other folks, reflections on this application? Go ahead, Vale.
Thank you. I think what this application was missing for me is the mission and the focus of the organization seems to really be on broadly like serving women and bringing just general choral singing to Austin, which is a space I care a lot about and am very passionate about. But I didn't see this as a great fit for the specific grants program because I didn't see how it was serving groups that are experiencing or at risk of cultural erasure and displacement within Austin, or that have experienced other forms of institutional marginalization.
Anyone else want to put their voice in this?
If there are no additional new comments that have not been stated already, seeing as there are none, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Sarah? Richard, Taylor, Vale, Lee, and Emily. All right. And we will be going to break now. We're just about right on schedule. It just turned to 10:59 when I was talking, so we will pause the recording. And we are back from break. The next application up for review is East Austin Creative Coalition, EACC. Taylor and Lee are our primary and secondary. And Taylor, whenever you're ready to begin.
Okay, so East Austin Creative Coalition is a group that is proposing a series of live public performances in Kenny Dorm's backyard in East Austin, the heart of the African American Cultural Heritage District. They want to work with local artists, performing artists, curators to sort of culturally direct the theme and the feel of these live performances. I really enjoyed that. This is a proposal that's proposing sort of Black art by Black cultural producers in the heart of, historic East Austin. So we really are talking about a group that has well-documented history of cultural erasure and displacement in the city of Austin. There's been a lot of dedication by the group's leadership throughout East Austin's history to promote cultural production. So there's a really kind of traceable heritage of this kind of work that they've been doing. So very established in East Austin. Some things I wish were a little bit stronger was really understanding intersectionality as it applies to the constituents that they want to serve. Looking into, what are the sort of intersection of, Black women and Black queer and trans folk that also want to be included in that cultural direction, and just really being a little bit more stronger in that, and prioritizing that. And then I think the other thing I noted was a little bit more on their sort of programmatic outreach, kind of how are they looking to reach new audiences, being a little bit more strategic on that. How are they looking to promote this sort of outside of their maybe immediate sphere, which I think that they have done a lot of work to establish, but sort of how are they going to use this grant to reach other groups outside of that?
Yeah,
Thank you, Kate.
oh, sorry.
Lee.
I jumped in front of you, Jesus.
You're
Eager
good.
to get in. Yeah, I agree with Taylor's review that mirrors mine. I thought overall this was a really strong application. And just personally, having been familiar with Harold from when I grew up in Austin, and this is the type of work that he's laying out here in this application is work that he's been talking about and building since my young years as an artist in Austin. So it was really exciting to see him feeling like that was coming to fruition. He also talked about that a little bit in the application itself. So overall, for all the reasons that Taylor pointed out, I thought this was really strong. Some of the things that I would have liked to, including the ASL and Spanish translations that they're working on incorporating, especially I think with the dollars from this grant. Again, to kind of just add a little bit more color to what Taylor said about intersectionality, I saw a clear explanation of the intersections of class and race, and just felt like it was lacking in other areas of specificity. There wasn't a budget included. And so there was just like guessing to be done around that. However, again, in the application itself, there was mention to like how different resources would be used. So there was some ability to make inference, but not explicitly, because there wasn't the budget included.
Great, thank you. Others who want to offer their feedback? Sarah, please go ahead.
I had the same note, Lee, about the answer and application about the budget, but I think that there was one attached. So once I got down to that, then gave some more insight. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, I made a note because it's hard on our end if there's not a thorough answer in one of the questions, but I think the attachment was there.
Yes, and I was just double checking, and the budget attachment is there. So I don't know if the comment was more on the question, but there is a budget attachment. And sorry if I interrupted. Panelist who was going to say something.
Go ahead, Richard.
I saw the one concern was that it has no track record, and that's because it's new. But I can tell you this from being in the Austin arts community all my life. If it has Harold McMillan's name on it, then you know it's going to have a solid background foundation. So those are my comments. Anyone who's been in the art scene in Austin all their lives like me knows Harold McMillan is a solid name.
Lee, again?
I thought I would just correct myself. You all are totally right. The budget is there. And so it's just in the application itself that Harold said something about like, I didn't have time to work on a budget. So then maybe my feedback is like, don't say that. Just, if you're giving us the budget, just say zero, like you did. I don't feel like he needed to kind of make an apology there, because it actually like led me to overlook what was included. So that's my kind of correction for the record.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Vale.
I just wanted to add that in this application, I found that the letters of recommendation were just really helpful, especially for me as someone outside of the Austin community. I thought they were just a really great demonstration of the history of this person and the work that they've done in Austin, and just really made their application even stronger.
Sarah?
I just wanted to add to pretty much what Richard said. I've produced events at Kenny Dorham's backyard, and Harold is always there, which is not every director is always just spending hours at their venue and hours at every event that they put on, which is a lot of events because they host other people all the time. And there's probably maybe 3 other people I can think of that are as dedicated as he is, and also all that he's navigated with the bureaucratic side of the city and the arts in the city. So I want to add my high recommendation.
Other thoughts? I see nodding heads. Anything else anyone wants to add?
If there are no additional comments from the panel, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Vale, Lee, Taylor, Richard, Emily. And Sarah, if you had your thumb up, I missed it. So, okay, so everybody's done. Next application up for review is Kala Darpan. Sarah and Taylor are our primary and secondary. And Sarah, whenever you're ready to begin.
Okay, they are applying for their production that's called Nurture and Endeavor of Kala Darpan for emerging Indian and Indian American artists. So their mission is to promote the new generation of Indian and Indian American artists in the field of Indian classical art. So this production supports their mission, obviously. And I don't have a lot of comments. I did give them a high score for their work and their community that they're reaching out to. I would say maybe some of the answers could have more specifics, like in the leadership. There's not exact, specifics of who is on their board and stuff. And I believe that there was no language accessibility addressed. So I would just like to see a future of marketing materials and things reaching out to other communities besides their primary communities, which may be bilingual at times, but just to consider marketing materials and not just the content in that accessibility.
Thank you. Secondary, Taylor.
Yeah, I also don't have too many comments on this project. I really did appreciate again the focus on emerging artists and younger artists, youth. The sense I got from this application that is very community oriented. So I imagine that there's probably a lot of informal community, a lot of informal sort of community voice that was happening, but I think that was something that was kind of lacking in the responses, sort of how they are using that community that that may or may not be actually very much there. Yeah, I also would have again liked to see just a little bit more specificity on sort of projects that they're proposing for using this funding for. But I also, and then the last thing I wanted to say was sort of diversifying the sort of Indian cultural production within, Indian culture, and talking about like different kinds of Indian art and like sort of more classical art versus the more contemporary art that we might be used to seeing as sort of outsiders from that culture. But I appreciated kind of the attention to that detail.
Awesome, thank you. Other perspectives? Feedback from other panelists?
If there are no additional comments, and again, we are asking panelists not to repeat anything that has already been stated. So if there are no new additional comments, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Vale, Lee, Sarah, Taylor, Richard, and Emily. Okay, next application up for review is Austin Intercultural Network. Vale and Sarah are our primary and secondary, and Vale whenever you're ready to begin.
Okay, so this proposal from the Austin Intercultural Network is to support the Austin Summer Carnival, which celebrates Afro-Latino, Afro-Brazilian, and Afro-Caribbean carnival traditions. I thought this was a strong application because it was focused on serving those communities, the Afro-Latino, Afro-Brazilian, and Afro-Caribbean communities. I thought at times that the application itself could have been more explicit about how it's serving those communities and centering them in this work. But I did find that the letters of recommendation and the project documentation that was provided kind of helped to fill in those gaps and showed how those communities are more represented and centered in this project overall. So I'm really glad that those were included. But overall, I found it pretty strong. And I also, sorry, going back to the letters, they also really kind of address the intersectionality issue within them as well, which was really helpful. But those are my general comments.
Thank you. Secondary, Sarah?
I don't have any differing views or much more to add to what Vale said, but I am going to look back at the letters. So thank you for mentioning that, because the two things that I noted, specific areas that I agreed there weren't many details in the answer, were leadership, which I found on their website. And then intersectionality. So I'm going to go right now and look more into that to review my score. But yes, overall, yeah, good application.
Okay, any other feedback? And remember, oh, go ahead, Lee.
I just had an overall reflection on like their application, kind of like how they approached it. I just feel like it was very clearly laid out as reviewers who are reviewing so much information. I appreciated kind of, they had like bullet points that had like, this is clearly responding to this piece. And so it made it easy to follow and also kind of easy to review and come back to. So just that note.
Thank you. And remember, we are not trying to reach consensus, so you can just put your view in front of the group so that applicants can hear your perspective. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think overall, I felt this proposal really hit on the sort of elevating the diverse arts and culture sector just by nature of what Carnival means. It is this intersectional confluence of culture and expression in so many different facets that happens all over the world. So for Austin to sort of bring that in and adopt that as a way that we can celebrate the diversity that we have here. As somebody who used to live in San Francisco, and Carnival was a very, very major time of the year for all cultural groups, from schools to dancing to music, everything. So having an opportunity to support sort of that cultural production here, I really appreciate that.
Anyone else?
Seeing as there are no other comments, Seeing none, if you would please, panelists, finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Lee and Taylor, Vale, Emily, Richard, and Sarah. All right. Next application up for review is Schottky Moves Dance Company. Vale and Taylor are our primary and secondary. And Vale, whenever you're ready to begin.
So this organization blends yogic science and artistic expression through choreographic material. Originally, they shared that they were founded to serve children, but have evolved over time to support feminine figures that support children. They're applying for funding to support a multidisciplinary art show focused on telling authentic stories from the perspective of the feminine aspects of existence. I thought this was a really interesting proposal. I think that the mission and the history of service seems more rooted in broadly serving all women, rather than kind of explicitly serving communities that are at risk of cultural erasure and displacement, or that have experienced other forms of institutional marginalization. So I kind of questioned if this is the right fit for this grants program. I also think that the question around intersectionality could have been addressed more explicitly. There was kind of more of a focus on the unifying factor of gender, rather than thinking about all of the intricacies that come along, maybe with someone's gender and race and socioeconomic status and things like that.
Thank you, Vale. Secondary, Sarah? Oh, no, I'm sorry. No, Taylor. Looking at the wrong
I thought
one.
it was me. Okay. Yeah, I agree. I agree also. I think that, sorry, I'm trying to collect my thoughts and give you something new, but I thought it was a great proposal, and I really appreciated the focus on health and well-being as it related to artistic expression. I was a little thrown where I thought that there might be some notes of cultural appropriation, and I would have liked to see just sort of more cultural leadership sort of reflecting the key constituents that they wanted to serve. And again, just more specificity on how they are interacting with these groups, what kinds of community relationships that they have to be working with these groups, and sort of at the cultural leadership level, sort of understanding, like, how they're equipped to work with these groups, sort of what strategies do you have to kind of cross that and make that a priority. Yeah.
Any other thoughts from folks?
If there are no further comments from the panel, again, we're asking panelists not to repeat what has already been stated, but had any new or different comments that have not been stated already. Seeing as there are none, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Taylor? Everybody except for Richard? And Richard. Everybody raised their thumb at the same time. That's great. All right, next next application up for review is Tejano Music Alliance of Texas. Richard and Taylor are our primary and secondary. And Richard, whenever you're ready to begin. And you're still muted, Richard. It looked like you tried to unmute yourself, but it's still there.
I'm gonna do it every time, aren't I? Let me get back to my notes.
Okay, and the timing will start as soon as you start giving your comments.
So they want to, promote and expand and preserve the historical and cultural aspects of Tejano music, which is what we need. Didn't seem to specify though the target audiences. They're 18 years old, but they didn't have a website, so that was kind of, I thought that was odd. The leadership was, they cited only 3 leaders, again, 18 years old, I would expect more. They have 2 flagship programs, a Brown Santa Drive, which is great in that regard, but it's not, arts. And they had a teen idol since 2019. I couldn't find anything on a Tejano idol concert. I looked all over the place. They really promoted it, but I couldn't find it at all. So that really made me skeptical. The application, it looked like they cut and paste 2 different spots. It looks, if executed, looks like a great event organization. I was just skeptical insofar by looking out there of what they've done. I was a bit skeptical of their getting this money. So that was kind of my end result.
Thank you. Secondary, Taylor?
Yeah, it seemed to me like this was a cultural music production that's been around maybe for a while. Understanding that their key constituents are those who have experienced cultural erasure and displacement within Austin and have a history of that. I saw that there was primarily they're using this to pay musical artists for their events, which are ticketed, but they purport to be offering these sort of low-cost options for families. But primarily, I think the funds were going to paying artists that are performing. It was really unclear if those were going to be local Austin artists. Space fees and equipment rental in and around Austin. I noticed that they have a large presence in South Austin, from just some of their past flyers that I that I had seen. I thought that they could have been a lot stronger on accessibility and offering more specialized programming around that beyond the sort of mandated ADA requirements for their venues, especially since it seemed like their venues, their events are really popular. And so, really starting to cater to those who might have disabilities in hearing or getting to these locations.
Okay, other thoughts? Go ahead, Sarah.
I just wanted to add to some of Richard's comments that I've never worked with this organization, but I have worked with a few other Tejano and Conjunto organizations in Austin, and I believe that their main event is the gala. And so perhaps their application is saying that the other 2 things are new events. I'm not sure if that's why you didn't find anything about it, but I just wanted to add that I do know from being working alongside some of these communities that the gala is their main annual event over the years.
Thanks. Lee, got your hand also.
Yeah, I was just going to add that I also had hoped to have a website since I was trying to get a little bit more sense of their work, but I did find, even though their Facebook link that they included doesn't actually work, but on Facebook, when I search them, I could find them. And then I got a much better sense of what they're up to. And I felt like that was a really active space. And I don't know, the best way I can describe it, the vibe that I got is it's just very old school. So then it just felt like, okay, yeah, you're probably marketing more through, word of mouth and paper flyers and potentially, this Facebook presence. And that resonated with my experience of different organizations that work in a little bit less of a like tech virtual based space. Yeah, those are just my experiences of their online presence.
Okay, thanks for your observation. Other reflections?
If there are no additional comments from the panel, seeing as there are none, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Sarah, Richard, Lee, Vale, Taylor, and Emily. All right, our next application up for review is Austin Foundation for Architecture. Richard and Lee are our primary and secondary, and Richard, whenever you're ready to begin.
I unmuted myself before I started talking. So it's a professional foundation to promote architecture to future generations. Also, there's a certain, line of where the art of architecture, there's a gray area. Where's that tipping point where it is art? So that was something that hit me immediately. It's for future generations and the underrepresented, which is good. This is a professional niche that needs to be promoted to all cultures. So, that was good, but it's for future generations. I did not see one thing on green building in its application, website, leadership, anything. That was troubling. It seems to me somewhat of a traditional group just now trying to get into more of the communities and cultural responsiveness, inclusion. So I had a bit of trouble of wanting to be excited or supportive because of those elements.
Yeah, my experience of reading their application was somewhat maybe similar in some ways, in that it seemed like in their newest iteration as an organization, they are like focusing more on diversity, equity, inclusion kind of across the board. Although I was a little bit confused. It sort of seems like the old mission had underrepresentation like in the mission, but then this work seems a little bit more focused on it. So I think I was just a little bit unsure about the trajectory, but just kind of like reading what the actual work does beyond the mission itself. It sounds like this is newer to them. So on the one hand, I felt like they couldn't get as high a marks because they weren't, this wasn't part of their original mission. On the other hand, I also think that it's both part of this grant application and my personal interest to like also uplift groups that have understood that this is important and come around to that in their work. So that was present for me in my scoring and in my like assessment of this. Some of that work seemed to be like they highlighted their work, the hip hop architect camp or something like that. That again, on the one hand, felt like that was a deep partnership with another organization or another entity. So it wasn't necessarily their work. And at the same time, as they are newer to this field of kind of cross-cultural work, it also made sense to me. Like that seemed like an appropriate approach to partner with people who are already steeped in that work. So I kind of kept going back and forth. I feel like we're catching this organization at this time where they are kind of newly trying to take this on, seemingly like very, sincerely. So overall, I thought it was a good application for an organization that is like newly moving in this direction. The primary things that I would have wanted to see is just kind of like longer standing like footing in the communities of this grant, but they don't have that yet. So that's, you know, I think that's just where they are.
Yeah, go ahead, Taylor.
From the little bit I know about their work, would be their work, the public art that they've done in East Austin, Las Piñatas that they did. 1 year was on East Austin, and I think the next year was at the Mexican American Cultural Center. And so that was a partnership with Latinos in Architecture, which I did not see that group mentioned in their application. I can't recall. But again, that's kind of speaks to that partnership that they have, which, you know, again, on the one hand, I applaud, but I would have liked to see kind of just using that as, if that's their strategy for reaching their key constituencies, making that a little bit more clear. But, you know, if this proposal is in line with the work and the partnership that they have done, then, you know, I do see this as an opportunity to kind of continue that sort of artistic practice as it intersects with design. I know this proposal is really more about sort of creating this design center, which I don't know if like the construction of a physical location is necessarily in line with what we want to support in this grant. I'm not, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, I think that they, you know, have shown potential to support artists in a way, and I don't know if this is necessarily the project for us to fund for that continued mission.
Emily? You're muted, Emily.
The top description says that they're in the process of launching a center, but the support from the city will go towards growing existing programs and creating new programs, examining the impact of design in our community. I just wanted to share my experience with Hip Hop Architecture Camp. I was really excited to see that there's an architect that's partnering with organizations all over the country to launch this program, and we've had it for the past 2 summers in Memphis. It's more of a co-creation where the partner comes in and that you know, you're pooling from local talent and local collaboration to create this localized curriculum. And I think it could be a game changer for Austin youth. And the young people really, really, really love it. And it's just so excited to see young people get excited about design. And so I just wanted to add that my experience of like this investment could seed a really great opportunity for youth in the community.
Thank you, Emily. Any other 3 minutes? Thank you. Any other thoughts, reflections?
I think one other thing I can just say that I don't think they said explicitly, but this in my notes is just that just the nature of an architecture based project that is specifically trying to invite in marginalized communities, that feels like it's in direct conversation with this grant's purpose of you know, like of people who are at risk of displacement. So like engaging marginalized communities in the built environment that they are in. Again, I don't know that they drew those lines specifically, but I thought that was a really, that is useful. It's, you know, I don't know, what is art? That's a whole, you know, PhD program to dive into, like, what is art? But I think to the goals of this grant, that resonates to me.
We have a couple minutes still. If folks have any other thoughts they want to add that hasn't been shared already. Okay.
Well, you're thinking if you do have any additional comments, just a couple of slight clarifications for some potential questions that may have been raised. Elevate is kind of a general operating question or a grant. So they may list a variety of different things that they do in their application. The city award, the budget amount is how they would spend the city funds if they were awarded funding. And some may not, talk about everything that they do. It may be a specific project. And then, the what is art, again, can be, yes, quite the discussion, but, in general, I'll say the eligibility requirement is that they're an arts nonprofit organization, which, as I mentioned earlier, doesn't apply to this application, I don't think, but, includes arts service organizations. So I think y'all are all aware of that, but just making that clear for anyone who may not be aware and for any applicants watching. About 40 seconds left. Any final additional comments from the panel? Seeing as there are none, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Sarah, Richard, Lee, Emily, Taylor, and Vale. All right, and we will break for lunch in a minute, so we will pause the recording. And we are back from lunch for Elevate Organization Panels 3. This is for nonprofit organizations with budgets under $43,000. We talked a little bit about this morning, but I just, for those of you who may not have been in attendance this morning when we first started, just a reminder that applicants have reviewed the applications prior to today with tentative comments and scores. They can change their scores on comments depending on feedback from their fellow panelists. They are not required to do so. They are not scoring by consensus either. So if panelists have differing opinions on an application, that is fine. They can bring in their personal knowledge. And if someone finds something confusing or isn't familiar with something and another panelist has insight on that, that's fine to do that, but we're not trying to change each other's scores, just using that to potentially change your scores. Panelists are not required to do so. We have asked panelists not to repeat any information that has already been stated, so just new information and or expanding upon something that has been said and just providing a little bit more detail. And so with that being said, we will reconvene or bring our next application up for review. We are also timing the applications. I'm getting my timer now. They have a maximum of 10 minutes per application. If there are any kind of technical difficulties or anything like that, we will pause the timer so that way the full time allotment is given. If we do get close to time, we'll give a 3-minute warning, 2-minute warning, 1-minute warning, 30 seconds, and then counting down from 10 until we reach the end of time, which we have not yet done today, but we have gone down to like 3-minute and 2-minute warnings. So with that being said, our next application up for review is Spectrum Theater Company. Emily and Sarah are our primary and secondary. And Emily, whenever you're ready to begin. And you are muted, Emily.
Sorry, I have 18 windows open.
You're good.
So Spectrum Theater Company's mission is to create professional productions that promote artistic excellence through thought-provoking stories of the human condition through the lens of the African-American experience. They develop new works, educational outreach, provide community enrichment, and ensure plays in the canon of Black theater are not forgotten. This was a really strong application, well written. I really like that their programming is different phases of productions, from stage readings to full productions to educational outreach. I feel like what this grant is designed for is what this company is doing. They're amplifying Black narratives in theater. And I mean, I only had one concern about the organization. They're operating on with a very tiny board. So my hope for them, as you know, they get investment and they want to expand their capacity, which is what the money from this grant will do, as well as support their season, that they also figure out a way to grow their board to help sustain and grow their work. So those were my thoughts. It's really nice. I left the city as this company was growing, and it's really nice to see that this work is being supported and that they're growing in the way that they do. And I think they're definitely ready for their next phase of organizational growth.
Thank you, Emily. Secondary, Sarah?
I mostly agree. I gave them high scores on this application. Was grateful for their descriptions and their answers, and just providing everything that we as panelists need to have a picture of the work they do and how meaningful it is. And I only took off a couple points in my scoring for one of the questions that asked about tourism. There wasn't a lot given there. And then language accessibility, which I believe their answer was that it's not been a great need with their audience yet, but just a note I made is something to look to having in the future. So just a couple points I took off there, but it's a wonderful application. And looking at their attachments, they have a support letter from an employee of the Carver Museum. So in my opinion, that shows a high level of community support and collaboration.
Any other panelists that would like to share?
Well, I like to, having been 10 years old, to me, having a track record of years is important to me. So I really like that. And the fact they were so laser focused on their programming, that was, I shouldn't say refreshing, that's terrible, but I enjoyed that, because a lot of these applications tend to kind of bop around, but their organizations having varying programs. But I enjoyed how organized and mission or program driven and focused they are. And then, come on guys, let me into your website. You have to have a username and a password, so I couldn't even get into your website. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Richard. Other thoughts? I saw a little concurrence in the group. Okay, any other reflections from folks?
Well, the panelists are gathering again, any new or additional comments have not already been repeated. What Richard was talking about when he said, I shouldn't say that about refreshing. We have asked the panelists not to compare applications to each other, just how the application meets the review criteria. So each application is being scored individually based on how it meets the review criteria, which is, I believe, what Richard was referring to when he stated that. With that being said, further comments, new comments that have not already been stated from the panel? Seeing as there are none, if you would please, panel, finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Lee, Taylor, Richard, everybody. Okay. Next application up for review is Hyperreal Film Club. Emily and Richard are our primary and secondary. And Emily, whenever you're ready to begin. Oh, and you're muted again, Emily. You're good.
Okay. Here, Hyper Real Film Club is Austin's largest community-focused pop-up film nonprofit. They are about to lease a permanent space in October, and what this programming, I mean, what the investment from City of Austin will do, will support the operations of that space for 6 months of programming. I have to say, I really enjoyed learning about this organization, and I love the idea that they've been spending the past 7 years all over the city using film as a medium to build community. I have notes somewhere, they use the term radical canon busting, which I loved as a way to present, take a new approach to curating. I think what's really important is their outreach, their approach to intersectionality. A third of their filmmakers, this is their first showing. They focus on the concept and care and passion of the film rather than the execution or how much money that the filmmaker was able to raise, which is really how we're going to get more voices in media and the performing arts, etc. So I appreciated that. And let me see, just go through this. The organization is very volunteer driven. They're giving opportunities to foster leadership within their community, creating network opportunities and guiding artists to other space and resources. And I just, yeah, I really enjoyed the work. I think it's definitely something that contributes to Austin's ecosystem when have these very established film institutions. It's really important to have smaller organizations that are really focusing on bringing new voices in.
Thank you, Emily. Secondary, Richard?
So, having produced an independent film, this is a necessary organization for independent and young filmmakers. I really enjoyed seeing that they're there, especially like the Austin Film Society, the other kind of independent film up here in the Jollyville. It closed. Alamo, those are all kind of getting too big for just the independents. So this is a really necessary group. So I was very happy that they were there. Getting a place to have independent films, being screened is so necessary in this city. And then also another thing, they celebrate shorts. Short films are not easy to air. So for them to recognize short films is just, it's incredible. I don't know if y'all realize how important that is. And also how they recognize every element of independent filmmaking, from the technical, all the way to, post-production. The only thing is they need to add the music in there, the scoring, the songs. That was the only thing I would recommend, is to add that element in there. Otherwise, it is, greatly needed here in Austin, that theater, that actual place. So I really enjoyed that application.
Great, thank you. Other feedback on this piece, perspectives that haven't been heard yet?
Seeing as there are no additional comments that have not already been stated. Seeing none. If you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Lee?
Can I say something while we're just finalizing scores real quick?
Yes.
This is kind of going back a little bit just to put this equity lens in front of y'all. I heard a few times people referring to the longevity of a program and that bearing credibility. And I want to encourage y'all to remember that sometimes lack of longevity is because of the under resourcing and the under investment in community-based work. So if you see you know, a program that really doesn't have the 9, 10, 12 years under their belt, really examine whether or not that doesn't necessarily show up in our criteria as like an essential. Like we need to be thinking about perhaps why, and see if it meets the priorities and the other criteria, to see if it's worthy of the score, and not rely on that longevity. Just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you for that, Surabhi. Taylor, yes?
Yeah, I just had a final comment about the application as well. Really exciting to see kind of grassroots film showcases at this level. And they've done a lot of really great work already. So exciting to have the opportunity to continue to support them. I think where they could have been stronger is sort of in a more reflection on their cultural leadership, and would like to see, you know, how they can use funds from this grant to be more inclusive at the creative direction level. I know that there was a lot of talk about being inclusive about the content that they were showing, and the artists that they're partnering with, and I think they're doing a great job at partnering with other cultural groups that kind of have those relationships with the community members. But they mentioned having that as a priority, so I like to just see that kind of reflected in how they're using the funds. Like, where are you bringing people in at this sort of level of power and leadership and creative direction?
Thank you, Taylor. Any other comments to add from the panel? Seeing as there are none, I believe everybody had. Oh, Richard, do you have another comment?
No, I was just getting ready for next one, so you won't yell at me for having it on deaf.
All right, and everybody is done with scoring for Hyperreal Film Club? Yes. Okay. All right, so next application up for review is Deaf Austin Theater. Richard and Taylor are our primary and secondary. And Richard, whenever you're ready to begin.
So yeah, Deaf Austin Theater, it's very impressive. You know, they have an impressive lineup of productions. They've done that for the last 6 years. They fill a really necessary niche. And they do well. I mean, I have to be impressed. They do well-known stage plays like Laramie. They don't mess around. So when I saw they did Laramie, I was like, this is good. This is good. And you have to realize it's at least what I saw is the only professional deaf LGBT organization, not in Austin, but in Central Texas. So it's extremely important, serving the deaf constituencies, which is a forgotten audience, and filling that void. I wish they'd done a better job of letting me know where, when they were created, the fact that they're at Zach and ground floor, you know, excellent, very impressive. That level can bring in tourist dollars. I know that's not a big deal, but Jesus knows what I mean when I say tourist dollars. You know, intersectionality, inclusion, deaf community has it all. So I just really enjoyed this application, especially in this area where it creates those opportunities in a community benefit that is really, really needed. So I really enjoyed this application.
Thank you, Richard. Secondary, Taylor.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything Richard said. You know, Austin is home to a really large population of deaf and hard of hearing persons. And so to see that there's a lack of sort of the arts kind of opportunities for, you know, a place that is essentially, you know, supposed to be a really great town for resources for them, is kind of shocking to see. So it's nice to see that there's somebody coming in a very specific way, and really sort of filling in that gap. I also really appreciate that they also have a priority to not only deaf individuals, but deaf individuals who are also LGBTQAI plus. So right there is a I think a very exemplary way of how like we want to support intersectionality and kind of what it means to be intersectional at your core, as far as prioritizing those groups. Yeah, I think, and yeah, just having really specific, paid opportunities for artists of, that fit these groups is really important.
Great. Anyone else with feedback or reflections on this one?
If there are no further comments from the panel, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Richard, okay, everybody, I didn't see if Emily put her thumb up, not calling you out necessarily, Emily. Okay, I just saw everybody all at the same time, so thank you. Next application up for review is Indian Dance Endeavor of Austin. It's application number 016732-S3T1Z8. I mentioned that because it might have been under the artist's name originally, but Indian Dance Endeavor of Austin. Taylor and Emily are our primary and secondary, and Taylor, whenever you're ready to begin.
Yes, so the Indian Dance Endeavor of Austin is a group that seeks to help propagate Indian dance by supporting young American artists of South Asian descent, primarily under the ages of 25, with help with their sort of first production, usually of Indian dance, theater, variety genres. I thought that this application was really interesting in that it's, a nonprofit production company for youth artists. And so for the ability for, young people to be able to produce their own own works, own productions, when they typically don't have access to spaces like that, or even the knowledge to kind of pull something like this off. Their history has shown that they have done a lot of productions that were led by high school students, and kind of piloted by them, and really offer the sort of financial and administrative support that they might not actually have. Yeah, I'm just looking through my notes here. I would have liked, again, to see just how more they were integrating community needs. I think it's there, but maybe being a little bit more explicit, and how they are sort of taking feedback from maybe the students and the youth that they work with and reintegrating it back into their programming. And I noticed that they didn't specify a whole lot of adaptations for non-English speakers. And I didn't see sort of the kind of clear marketing plan that I would have liked to see how they were reaching people outside of their maybe normal audience base. But overall, really great and exciting application and opportunity.
Thank you, Taylor. Secondary, Emily?
Yeah, I just want to second Taylor's comments, and just say, as somebody, as a youth theater practitioner, it really was exciting to see that there's this supportive infrastructure for young South Asian artists to produce work, and I'm just excited about that. The other thing I was really, just something that I noticed is that this young generation of artists really support one another, and especially when you go into high schools. And I would love to see this organization not only partner with organizations in the South Asian community, but like how can we partner with other youth organizations of different culture, to get this intercultural empathy for the next generation. Because I don't know, I think that there's a lot of potential there, for that. But yeah, I'm really, really grateful that this work is happening.
Thank you. Anyone else with reflections, thoughts that we haven't heard?
While panelists are thinking if they have any new comments that have not already been stated. Just a slight clarification for the applicants. We do ask that the panelists give suggestions and feedback for improvement as well, that what would make the application stronger, tying back to the review criteria. So just keeping that in mind when you're hearing some of these comments, it's what they liked and what they would have liked to have seen. With that being said, any additional comments for this application? If there are no new comments for this application, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Taylor, Richard, Sarah Lee, Vale, and Emily. All right, next application up for review is Austin Russian-Speaking Theater Company, ARTC. Emily and Lee are our primary and secondary. And Emily, whenever you're ready to begin.
Yeah, ART is a cultural organization committed to preserving Russian-speaking heritage and promoting cross-cultural understanding within the community, especially between recent immigrants from Russia and Ukraine. Their mission is to respond to diverse needs and provide cultural and learning opportunities. I really also excited to see this kind of work happening. There's access to education in Russian acting methods with Stanislavski and Chekhov. They do some work for young people, which I think it's really important for those communities, for the young people to get exposed to those cultural legacies. And then they organize multiple cultural events. I'm trying to access my notes here, which I cannot find at the moment. They mainly produce work, Russian-speaking work. And I was gonna see if someone can give me a minute to access my notes, and maybe if Lee, would you be able, so I can
Sure.
access where my
I was
notes
just
are?
going to suggest, yes, if the secondary wants to go, Lee, and then Lee, you can look at your notes. Lee, go ahead, please.
I'm happy to hop in. There's also like some loud thing happening outside my window. Hopefully it's not too distracting for you all. Yeah, I thought overall this seems like a really, an exciting program and good and important work to be done in general. The ongoing challenge I had was trying to figure out how this situates itself within the context of this particular grant. Serving an immigrant population seems like that is related to the goals of this grant, and folks who may be at risk of displacement generally. However, I felt like I'm ignorant to whether or not there is any kind of like longstanding Russian population in Austin that is at risk of displacement. And so that's where I struggled a little bit to know if this was aligned with kind of the spirit and intention of this grant. That being said, additionally in their intersectionality response, I was looking for a little bit more about intersectionality more generally. I think that the approach that they took to responding was more about just like marginalized communities, specifically immigrant communities. So yeah, I this one was one that, again, I think the work was strong, and I wasn't always sure that their constituency aligned with the parameters for the grant.
Thank you. Emily, did you find your notes, or can I ask?
Yeah, well, I found on one other thing. I mean, my other like within the cultural leadership approach is, they just mentioned, oh, we have this 8-member committee that provides feedback, but I'm just curious about more of like the process of how they approach leadership, and I would have I think that would have made their application stronger, to make a stronger case to support their work.
Thank you. Other thoughts from the panelists?
And I have just one other reflection. I was mindful trying to not take up too much time then, but one other thought that I had too, just in terms of strengthening the application, is that there was some reference to kind of the uniqueness and like power of bringing Russian and Ukrainian artists together through this work. However, I feel like that was really an opportunity to also go into more detail about that, what that means, or how that is offering a service to their community, in what way. Yeah, I just, again, it felt like there was more under the surface that I was hoping to get to that I didn't quite experience through the application.
Thank you, Lee. Additional comments from the panel? Anything that has not been stated already? Seeing as there are no additional comments, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Lee, Sarah, Vale, and Emily, and everyone. All right, next application up for review is Hope Events, Inc., doing business as Hope Campaign. Taylor and Sarah are our primary and secondary. And Taylor, whenever you're ready to begin.
Yes, so Hope is a gallery that I remember was based just west of South Lamar, in the outdoor gallery, and they've since moved their location to I think in East Austin Park. I could be wrong on that, but this proposal is essentially a partnership with let me get the name right, Amplify Asian, which is a group in Austin working with AAPI individuals. This is a mural project that would hope to amplify and elevate AAPI heroes and notable figures within Austin as we celebrate diversity and educate the public on sort of their contributions to our civic engagement. Overall, I thought this was a very strong application. I really appreciate that they are in partnership with a cultural organization here in Austin, as I think their initial mission has been to really be inclusive of all artists, but to take the step to be very specific in their kind of mission for this muralist project. I appreciated that they had a number of Asian artists that they have already begun conversation with to start this muralist project, and a lot of them have artists that I'm familiar with as well around Austin. So it shows me that they're really kind of taking the time to be intentional about this work. As I'm looking through my notes, I don't think I had too much other notes about it, but yeah, that's pretty much it. Thanks.
Thank you, Taylor. Secondary, Sarah?
I don't have a lot of comments either, because I agree with Taylor and thought it was a great application, great work that they're doing and have done in Austin's arts communities. The only note I had was for reviewers, if you haven't finished reviewing, on the program question near the end, that question's asked for marketing information, and in their answer to the budget, there was a lot more details about their marketing plan. So just FYI, if you're going back through that there was just great amount of information to shed light on the work that they're doing, and I scored it highly.
Any other comments on this application?
I talked to the leader because I thought that was a very interesting concept, and he's like getting together some Asian artists, like a Japanese artist with a Korean artist with a Taiwanese artist. This is just examples, and they're all going to get together and they're going to pick one of the heroes, so the other two Asian can understand the hero of that origin. So it's completely collaborative, but why it's being collaborative, they're all learning each other's culture. And so I thought that was very fascinating, very unique and fascinating way to apply this concept in this art. So I was very excited in that angle. So that's just, I wanted to add that.
Thank you. Anyone else?
There are no, oh, was someone going to say something?
I don't think so.
No? Okay. If there are no further comments, then please finalize your scores and let me know when you've done so. Lee, Taylor, Vale, Sarah, Richard, Emily. All right. Next application up for review is Deaf Film Festival. So just a reminder, some applications may have similar names. We recently reviewed just a couple applications ago, Deaf Austin Theater. This is Deaf Film Festival. This morning we had Tejano Music Alliance of Texas, and tomorrow we have a different Tejano group. So just be sure when you are scoring and making comments on the applications that you are referencing the correct application, especially if they have similar names. Again, Deaf Film Festival. Vale and Emily are our primary and secondary. And Vale, whenever you are ready to begin.
So the Deaf Film Festival provides a platform for deaf filmmakers from all over the world to showcase their work, gain recognition, and to be celebrated as artists, forging a path towards authentic deaf representation within the film industry. I thought this was a really strong proposal that was really focused on showcasing work by and for deaf artists. I thought it was very clear from the proposal that the leadership is comprised of members of the deaf community, so they're leading this work. And there was a really large emphasis, I thought, from the proposal on accessibility and also on intersectionality. I also thought it was really interesting how they're planning the festival to coincide with the Austin City Limits Festival at the same time. So I think that's a really interesting draw to get people to attend the festival and get to see these artists and their work.
I also agree. It was a really strong application, really beautiful work happening. Not only are they amplifying voices of the deaf and hard of hearing community, but also there was some talk in the application that they're also trying to be a resource for the film community, that they recently just consulted on a project to make sure that a character was represented appropriately. So I see a lot of potential for growth in this organization, and it was just really a joy to learn about this work happening. So yeah.
Wonderful. Any other comments on this application? Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, I did some research, dealing with film festivals in the years. So I did some research on deaf film festivals, and they're sparse out there. And these guys, they can have a real opportunity to put a leadership role as far as being the deaf film festival out there and have Austin yet again be a premier film festival city. And so there's a real opportunity here in that regard. If you do your situational analysis out there in the country and deaf film festivals, they're not there. So I was real excited, and that it's here in Austin, it could really put a foothold in that regard.
Great. Anyone else?
I was appreciated their notes around intersectionality and inclusion, specifically just to piggyback on what some of the, I forget which of the primary or secondary reviewers said, but that there was just a lot of specificity that led me to feel like they had a real understanding, again, not just like of what might be their primary or like the primary identity or one of the dominant identities of their constituency, but really like how like it is the intersection of the identities coming together that create further marginalization, and that they seem to understand that in a way that they were really trying to like work with, speak to, engage with that. So I appreciate it, not only like the understanding, but like the what seems like a depth of engagement around intersectionality.
Cool. Any other thoughts?
Seeing as there are no additional comments from the panel, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Yes, everybody. Thank you. All right, we are about 20 minutes ahead of schedule. We are scheduled to take a break now, panel. We have just come back from lunch. Do you want to continue on with another application or two, or go ahead and break now?
I wouldn't mind a break.
Okay, let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and take our break now then. We will pause the recording for now. We are back from break, continuing Elevate Organization Panel 3. 1 Ounce Opera is the next application up for review. Taylor and Richard are our primary and secondary. And Taylor, whenever you're ready to begin. Sure. And a reminder for those watching, we have a 10-minute max review time for each application. But the timer will not start until the primary starts giving their comments, and we will pause if there are any technical difficulties. So that way you get the full maximum allotted time for your application. If we do get close to time, I will give a 3-minute warning, a 2-minute warning, a 1-minute warning, a 30-second warning, and then we'll count down from 10 seconds, and we will complete the review when we get there. And again, it will start whenever the primary is ready. Looks like Taylor, whenever you're ready to begin.
Hello. Okay, so 1 Ounce Opera is a group that is dedicated to bringing opera into, unconventional spaces. They prioritize both hiring opera singers and artists, and also showcasing opera work that has been made by non-Eurocentric, sort of non-white sources. So in that they're kind of subverting the sort of traditional understandings and applications and accessibility of opera. I thought that this application was really strong. Their key constituency was very clear, being in that they reflected groups that had were experiencing cultural erasure and displacement. And I thought that their cultural leadership and sort of the makeup of their artists that they work with reflected that. Let's see if I have last comments. Yeah, overall, I think I just thought this was a really strong application. So thank you.
Thank you, Taylor. Secondary, Richard. You're muted, Richard. We'll pause the timer till you come off of mute.
I'm so sorry.
You're good.
So it's just a very creative way to execute the art of opera, to do it at creative spaces, whether at your local watering hole or, at a classroom. Just that whole creative execution to bring opera in unexpected places is what is needed, in this, old world art form. So I really enjoyed that part of their mission. They've been around, so I'm confident in their ability. One of the things that was very, very important to me was that they celebrated or pushed or applied or encouraged original opera. That is so unique and so necessary to have original music, not only for just songwriters, but songwriters in that particular niche. That really stood out. I was very thankful for that. I wish they would have been more specific in who was on their board and who was in their intersectionality and inclusion. That would have been my only recommendation. Otherwise, a very unique and refreshing group.
Okay, any other comments or thoughts on this application?
While panelists are thinking if they have any additional thoughts to add, with a reminder that we are asking panelists not to repeat comments that have been previously stated. Just a slight clarification, both for the panelists and for the applicants. In the portal application, and I don't know if this is what you were referring to or not, Richard, but just so the panelists are aware, demographic information was provided by the applicants, but it is not visible to the panelists on the board and staff. So I'm not sure if that's what you were referring to, but if it was, just so you all are aware as a panelist, the Economic Development Department collects that data just for, data administrative purposes, but since we cannot score on immutable characteristics such as race and ethnicity, that is not visible to you all as a panelist. So just keep that in mind when you're scoring. With that being said, any new or additional comments that have not already been stated by the primary or secondary? If there are no further comments, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Taylor, Lee, Richard, Emily, Vale. And Sarah, are you finalized with your score on this one? Okay, great. Thank you. Next application up for review is lifelong learning with friends. Richard and Lee are our primary and secondary. And Richard, whenever you're ready to begin.
Okay, so this one was interesting. There was certain duality I had with this because it provides adult learners with the intellectual and development disabilities access to post-secondary education opportunities, one of which includes the arts. So arts isn't the dominating focus, it is one of the parts. So I had to put that as this is a cultural arts grant funding. So I made that note. Their history was vague. I couldn't really get a specific history on it, and it's and it never it didn't cite the actual incorporation in its application. The cultural leadership, Dr. Pierce is the prominent leader, and yet in the website, on the application, Dr. Pierce is the prominent leader, and the website he's just mentioned. So that was confusing. Having one versus the other, I need continuity when judging, so I feel confident. They work with some good organizations with Ruby's Rainbow Down Syndrome Association. Their mission includes art classes amongst others. So again, that was another note I had to take. We're an arts funding group. So their collaboration with UT and these other groups is a major plus. So I thought that was great. That's anytime you're associated with UT, that will give much more credibility, or, you know, it gives you much more higher profile. So I think the group is a great group mission, but it needs work in regards, or if it's going to look for arts funding, it needs to have arts more prominent, and it needs to be more specific on who their leaders are. It was a bit confusing.
Thank you, Richard. Lee?
Yeah, I struggle with some of the same questions around the focus of their work related to this grant. The other question that I had was that obviously working with a group, like their primary constituency being adult learners with intellectual and developmental disabilities, which is certainly a marginalized group. It's not necessarily a group that is at risk of displacement, to my knowledge. And so you know, it fit within the scope of interest of this grant, but maybe not the primary focus of this grant. So that I felt like was worth noting. I also would have been excited to see some more notes or some more expression about like working with English as a second language, or just like any non-English speaking communities. And they said that they hadn't had much people, you know, demand that. I think I would have been excited to see how they like pursued that, like, you know, how do they come to the conclusion? I think it's easy for many folks to feel like people aren't demanding it, but there's like a need to pursue the efforts to really be able to assess that. And then lastly, the other thing that was stood out to me was just around their notes around intersectionality. I think there's just a long-standing history of some like deep intersectional there's deep intersections between folks with disabilities, especially learning disabilities, and race and gender. And I think there's a little touch on class, but like they didn't really get into those intersections. And so it again made me not sure that this was a great fit for this particular funding, you know, however great their work may generally be, and like what a great service it may be to this community. I'm not sure if it fits this funding.
Thank you, Lee. Other thoughts, comments on this application?
Panelists are thinking or searching the notes to see if they have any additional information that's not repeating what has been said. Clarification or slight clarification for the applicants. Cultural funding staff has did a cursory review of the eligibility of the applications, just looking at the yes and no questions without looking in detail to see you know, if these are eligible. So if they answered yes, that they are a 501c arts organization, then we deem them eligible. If this application does score high enough to receive funding, we will double check that they meet all eligibility criteria, such as being an arts organization, which is a requirement, 501c arts organization, in order to receive funding before we enter into contract with them. So comments noted from the panel. And, you know, so for the applicant, you know, just making that more clear in the future would be helpful for making a stronger application. With that being said, any additional comments from the panel? If there are no further comments, please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Lee and Sarah, Richard, and everyone else. All right, next application up for review is Willie Bernard Martinez Brown. So I guess it was by the applicant's name. So Willie Bernard Martinez Brown, Taylor and Sarah are our primary and secondary. And Taylor, whenever you are ready to begin.
Yeah, just give me a second. I've lost it in the sea of tabs, which I guess is the name.
Yes.
Okay, so just give me a second.
That is fine. A reminder for the applicants that we will not start the 10-minute timer until the primary starts giving their commentary. So Willie Bernard Martinez Brown.
Okay, I found it. Yes, so Willie Bernard Martinez Brown is actually the founder of something called Me Arts, which is a performance arts education, sort of supplemental education for youth in particularly a lot of South Austin neighborhoods. So they create a safe environment for underserved Black and Brown communities for artistic expression in dance, music, acting, and oratory, which they call poetry. So they have poetry classes and events. Students can also select music production, and so they can able to get skilled in music production. They also have a dance component and a theater component. I thought that overall this was a very strong application that was really focusing on the intersection of youth and underserved communities, especially Black and Brown communities. I really like that there's already a really strong presence from this group in the work that they're doing, particularly in neighborhoods in Austin that we know to be home to a lot of these communities that's outside of East Austin. And I think sometimes that is those sort of South Austin communities get a little bit overlooked. So I really appreciate that there's already a really strong community relationship that is there. Like I said, this application scored pretty high. I think if anything, my only note would be understanding accessibility and creating specialized programming around that. Aside from, sort of the mandated that they might need in schools. But other than that, yeah, really enjoyed this group's work.
Thank you, Taylor. Secondary, Sarah?
I don't have much to add. I didn't put a lot of comments, which usually I would put more comments if I had taken points away. So I scored them highly. I thought it was a great application and good work they're doing. And one part that stood out to me is the intersectionality. They gave a great answer and lots of proof that their work achieves that. So that's what I have to add.
Great. Any other thoughts, reflections, comments on this application?
I agree. It was a really great application, and I also really appreciate the leadership approach and that, if the organization gets these funds, that the funds would be into cultivating more teaching artists and investing in teaching artists, but teaching artists actually from those neighborhoods, which is just crucial. So I'm glad to see this application, the work happening, and feel they're worthy of investment.
Okay, so I really did, love this concept and the whole thing, but I did my research and it's, the Travis County Juvenile Probation Department, Me Dance, Me Vocal, Me Acts, Me Music, and the annual Me Arts Festival, but they didn't mention any performances, names, performers, audience. Website only has 2 programs. Doesn't mention any upcoming programs. They say 3,500 to date students. Well, what programming specific? Website only mentions 2 music classes. They can't measure funding without ROI. I don't see any real tangible programs, performances. Again, conceptually, it's great, but I don't see actual what they've done.
I'd like to make a response to this because I see it coming up throughout the day. As somebody who founded as a recovering executive director of a community organization and multiple community organizations, when you got 100 kids and maybe 2 people help you and 1 or 2 board members, it is so hard to keep up with all of this web stuff and Facebook and social media. And like what your technology is the community and the word of mouth. And I think this is why all of these organizations need this kind of investment to help with their capacity, because I mean, just from personal experience, there were so many times that I did not have $100 to pay a web person to update this, to do this, to write what just happened the past 3 weeks, because it's just this cycle of being underfunded and not having the bandwidth to do it, and especially when your most important thing is to be there for the kids. But I just wanted to put that in the space of being someone who's been through it.
Thank you.
Also, I wanted to, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna call on you to go ahead.
I do see they do have a place on their website for programming as well. And I think also when you're working with schools as a sort of supplemental education, like you're relying a lot on the school to do a lot of that sort of marketing and community outreach. And I think a lot of the work that they have been focusing on, or I'm seeing that they're focusing on, is making that outreach with, you know, schools and recreation centers in the community that kind of had that constituency base that they reach. But I do see a couple of events, Richard. I'm not sure if you saw some, but they have a couple of upcoming ones at the Juvenile Center. I don't know if you saw that and maybe wanted more information too. But there's a little bit on the website.
You.
Thank you, panelists, and thank you again. We ask that you bring your personal perspectives, whether that is going to the website or the equity work that you bring into this, or just the knowledge that you bring into this. So great discussion. Thank you for those reminders and for all the different comments. We have about 3 minutes left. And just a reminder, that we are not scoring on consensus. But if you do have viewpoints that could be helpful for the other panelists to consider in their scores, that is valuable to bring in. With that being said, any further comments on this application? Seeing as there are none, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Vale, Richard, Lee, Taylor, Emily. And Sarah, thank you. Now take your time. We want to make sure we're getting this. Again, you're not required to change your scores, but if you are moved to change your scores based on the commentary from other panelists, we want you to do so. Next application up for review is Austin Museum Partnership. Lee and Taylor are our primary and secondary. And Lee, whenever you're ready to begin.
Okay. So the Austin Museum Partnership is essentially a nonprofit that functions like a collective of a bunch of different museums and cultural organizations in Austin. They say 30 plus museums and cultural orgs. And they offer support to those other organizations and produce a couple of events themselves. Their big annual event is Austin Museum Day, which their application focuses on. And their application also talks about resuming Educators Night, that is for educators throughout Austin to access curriculum resources, exhibits, and field trip experiences. So that's them as a whole, like overall. I thought that their work seemed really interesting and collaborative across museums. I didn't find that they had a overt mission to work with culturally specific organizations or museums, or they were particularly rooted in any community specifically. So I guess that was kind of one of my overarching questions, was like the specifics of their application, or like their constituency within their application. Similarly, when they spoke about intersectionality, they talked about being I think like all women staff, but that to me felt like a pretty light understanding of what intersectionality might be. And again, it didn't seem like that was about that was their mission. It kind of felt like this is happenstance. So overall, I felt like they're doing some work that seems interesting, and they have evolved to have a bit more of a like wider maybe approach to their constituency. They started including Spanish translation for their museum day in recent years. However, it doesn't seem like, from what I can tell here, that any of that is central to what they're doing or to the groups that they're working with. Yeah, those are my overall thoughts.
Thank you, Lee. Secondary, Taylor?
I hold similar views to Lee, and noticed that their key constituency truly is institutions, right? So institutions can join based on a membership fee, and that's kind of where they're tailoring their program to. They offer professional development and even cultural training to these institutions, and I think purport to serve as a sort of, conduit between how institutions can base their exhibitions based on what the community wants, but the sort of relationship to the community is just like, I didn't see that really well exemplified in this application. I do appreciate their annual events. I think, something like an educator event where educators can network and share stories, and also give their opinion on like how they believe the museum curriculum can start to match sort of what they're teaching in schools is very notable. But I think beyond that sort of kind of one day, what are they doing to really invest in sort of either education or youth museum mentorship opportunities, something like that. But overall, I didn't feel comfortable scoring this as high because I just didn't see that the constituency matched what we were hoping to support with this grant.
Okay, any other thoughts? Go ahead, Sarah.
I just wanted to add, since I have experienced Austin Museum Day, I'm not disagreeing with my fellow panelists that the founding of this organization is probably not primarily to focus on marginalized communities, but for economically disadvantaged people in Austin, which is a growing demographic probably with the growth of the city and how expensive it is it is a one-time event, an annual event, but it's a really big deal for people that can't afford to go into museums. So I just want to add that because I've been before with my families.
Any other thoughts, comments?
There are no further comments from the panel. If you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you've done so. Lee? Vale, Sarah, Richard, Emily, and Taylor. Okay. Next application up for review is Blow Commotion. Taylor and Vale are our primary and secondary. And Taylor, whenever you're ready to begin.
Okay, so Blow Commotion is a small performing arts organization. They really prioritize any musician, regardless of their skill level, to join their band. They have music instructors as well for different levels of experience. They also offer a musical instrument lending library for those who do not have access to acquiring a music instrument but still want to participate. They do a lot of community performances around town, bringing their style of music to unconventional locations and trying to keep it equitable in the locations that they participate in. I really enjoyed learning about this group. I think what they're doing is really awesome as somebody who loves the idea of being musically inclined, but isn't really always so fortunate. So I think there was a lot of great talks of being inclusive. However, I think that the nature of their organization is very general and inclusive of anybody that would like to be a musician. And you know, trying to eliminate the barriers of maybe people who might not be financially inclined to participate. I would have thought it would have been stronger if there was more specific prioritizing of these groups that are experiencing cultural erasure and displacement. I think that sometimes being all inclusive doesn't really, you know, address the need for equity in elevating groups that are typically left out of these conversations. But so I think that's kind of, I struggled a lot with it because I think that it had a lot of merit, but want to be cautious of language that is very much like come one, come all, and things like that. So, but otherwise, very, very exciting work that they're doing here in Austin.
Thank you, Taylor. Secondary, Val?
Yeah, I totally agree with Taylor's opinion on this. I think that it's a really worthy cause that they're doing. But I think for this grants program, I had hoped to see a much more explicit focus on these communities that are at risk of cultural erasure and displacement within Austin, or that have experienced other forms of institutional marginalization. So I think that would have made it a better fit for this grants program.
Okay. Others, any other reflections or thoughts?
While we're waiting to see if others have any thoughts, just a reminder in case the applicant has not been watching live, but we are asking panelists not to repeat anything that has been said, but only to give new information or a new comment that has not been stated by a previous panelist. If there are no new additional comments, panel, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Lee and Emily, Taylor, Sarah, Richard, and Vale. All right, next application up for review is Traditional Jewish Music Foundation. Emily and Taylor are our primary and secondary, and Emily, whenever you're ready to begin. Oh, and you're muted, Emily.
Here we go.
Okay.
The Jewish Music Foundation works to create accessible resources for Jewish musical cultural heritage programs. They enable musicians, students, artists to create the art, music, and multimedia performance to keep alive the story of the Jewish people and to build real life connections between Jewish and non-Jewish communities. They do concerts, perform in schools, publications, seminars, conferences, and they want to provide an accessible body of music to the community. This project would be to support the production and creation of a multimedia puppet show that acts to tell the story of Jewish resistance during the Nazi-occupied era. It's written through stories of one woman who lives in Austin right now and is 94 years old. I was really pulled in by the first paragraph of what this was going to support. I'm a lover of puppets. But the application, there was just a lot of really didn't answer the questions. I can just start with, you know, I'm sorry, wait. Let me just pull this up again. I'm sorry. I have all these things open. I wanted to know the process, how they're putting together this work. I wanted to know who the artists they would bring into the table. I wanted to know how they're centering equity in the creation of this performance. I wanted to know, they're partnering with all of these schools, but how are they partnering? Like, what is the intention behind it? Wanted to see if my colleague the secondary can go while I pull up the rest of the notes that I had.
It's
Yeah.
me. Yeah, so I struggled with this application just by the nature of the subject matter that they're choosing to engage with, and also their key constituency being Jewish cultural awareness and Jewish Americans. I'm not necessarily classifying that as a group that is either really experiencing a lot of cultural erasure today, or a topic that is really that cultural underfunded. I think that is actually a very well-funded, well understood topic, and I think especially in early education, there's a lot of emphasis that's put on this era and this time period, whereas I think that there are a lot of stories that don't get that same attention. And so I hesitated a lot, and I struggled a lot with this because I don't know if this is the sort of content and topic and key constituency that I would hope this grant is supporting.
Okay. Emily, did you find your notes or?
Yeah, I mean, there was one question about engaging tourism, and just the response was, oh, of course we engage tourism. I'm not saying that, I'm paraphrasing, but it didn't say like how you're doing it or who you're doing it. And I found like this was a theme throughout the whole application. And so I just for the future recommend the organization really work with someone to learn how to speak about your work and to tell the story of your organization, as well as to tell the story of your artistic process and tell the story of who you're engaging with, because I just, the answers were very short and incomplete. And then, also to back up, to second what Taylor was examining, I just didn't see the compelling case within that application.
You. Any other reflections on this application? Lee?
I was just gonna say that just having, had Jesus's voice in my ear throughout this process, and all of the training that we got around doing this process, that it, as it can be challenging when we're we're not grading on did somebody answer the question very precisely, which many applications and other places do, or like, did the person have a grant writer come and write this? And at the same time, we're wanting to get the information, to Emily's point. And so I guess I just wanted to also offer that if like outside support in the writing isn't available, at least offering as much detail as you can allows us as reviewers more opportunity to connect with what you're saying about your work. If you have that opportunity to get additional support, that's fantastic. And if you don't, I think that maybe just elaboration would allow us to better understand how you understand your work in kind of in the Austin arts landscape.
Thank you. Any other thoughts?
Thank you, panelists. If there are no additional comments, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Sarah, Lee, Richard, Taylor, and Emily and Vale. All right, and we have 5 more applications to go. We are scheduled for a break, so we will go ahead and take that now. We will pause the recording. Then we are back from break, resuming the Elevate Panel 3, day 1. Next application up for review is Home Street Music. Lee and Vale are our primary and secondary. And Lee, whenever you're ready to begin.
Great. I again have like lawn mowing or something happening nearby, so hopefully it's only annoying to me and not to you. So Home Street Music, they are a nonprofit in Austin that is working with folks who are living in homelessness and offering kind of different musical opportunities. Some that are like informal, it seems like informal circles, and some that are more public events that showcase the songs and stories of people, as they say, songs and stories of people who've experienced homelessness in Austin, alongside local professional musicians. So it's also an opportunity for local musicians to come in and have paid work and work alongside the folks living in homelessness. So I felt like there were a lot of strengths to this application. Certainly working with folks who are living in homelessness, which is a growing population in Austin as Austin evolves. And you know, it was hard to determine, is that a group we would say is at risk of displacement? Well, yes, like by the nature of the group, they're at risk of displacement. Culturally, erasure, that's kind of feels like a different thing altogether. So anyways, it's interesting to think about their work in the context of this application. But it does seem like since their beginning, working with unhoused folks has been a key focus throughout. That was really obvious. They have a lot of relationships and partnerships with groups like Caritas in Austin that work with other folks who are living in homelessness, as well as with, is it called Community Village, I think, was the other partner that they have that is, I think, supporting them along the lines of mental health services, which I thought was really strong to have in the application. However, it was less clear to me that they are really like understanding, sitting and looking at equity along any other lines or intersectionality. They spoke pretty generally in the section on intersectionality around folks who have experienced homelessness facing multiple forms of marginalization, but then across like race and ethnicity and gender and disability. And they just kind of listed that broadly, but didn't really talk about how they are engaging folks along those lines. So I felt like that was missing. I also would have hoped to see in their cultural leadership some representation of folks who have lived in or are living in homelessness themselves. This is like folks who are not, from what I can tell, folks who are not homeless working with people who are homeless, which can quickly be a kind of charity framework. So I was hoping to see some ways that made me understand that they had a different approach. That was not clear to me. So let me just make sure those were kind of my main highlights. I guess overall, I thought that the work they were doing was interesting and meaningful, and again, just not sure if their approach to work or kind of how they're thinking about their work is aligned with what we are hoping to fund through this grant, or at least not at the top of that list of what we're hoping to fund with this grant.
Thank you, Lee. Secondary, Val?
Yeah, I think Lee makes a lot of great points. I think the section on intersectionality for me kind of helped me understand their key constituencies a little bit more within the unhoused population in Austin. But I do think they could have been much more explicit about the communities that are at risk at cultural erasure, I would say specifically, that they're serving. I did appreciate, and it was like kind of mentioned in the application, but I had to do a little bit more digging into like the letters of recommendation to see that they do always have like a licensed mental health professional at all of their events, which I think, again, that was helpful for me looking at intersectionality and seeing in a way that they're providing an additional support when it comes to mental health and things like that for participants. But I do think overall, the application could have just benefited from a lot more explicit lens on the communities of that are at risk of cultural erasure and displacement within Austin and that have experienced other forms of institutional marginalization.
Well, thank you. Any other thoughts on this application? Any comments that we haven't heard yet? Go ahead, Taylor.
Yeah, I first of all, I really appreciate their work with Community First Village. I've done some volunteering there before, and it's a really great community in Austin that is served to support those who've experienced homelessness. My only critique is similar to Lee's concerns about just the opportunities that they're providing. I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, if I kind of missed this or if it wasn't necessarily clear, like, are they paying artists or not just artists, but like, is there paid opportunities for, for those experiencing homelessness to perform, or was that included in the budget? I know they have kind of a list of opportunities that they provide, hiring and training and coordinating local professional musicians. Are they sourcing that from within their key constituency groups? Or just some questions that I have. And then in regards to their budget, how much of like the living wage that they're offering for all of these various productions that they needed, how much are those coming from community members that are indeed experiencing homelessness and might actually need, this as a source of income? So if anybody had any insight to that, I'd love to hear it too.
I think those are great questions, Taylor. I think they did talk about paying artists, but I think I interpreted that to be the local, how they describe it, local professional artists. I didn't interpret that to be the like homeless artists that would be working with them. So I'm curious if anybody else understood it differently, but yeah, I would say that to me, that seems like also an opportunity for strengthening the application and potentially the work itself.
Anyone else?
If there are no further comments that have not already been stated by other panelists, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Taylor, Sarah, Richard, Lee, yes, Emily, and Vale. All right, next application up for review is Art 84. Emily and Richard are our primary and secondary, and Emily, whenever you're ready to begin.
Art 84 at Cannon Coffee, they present art exhibitions. They focus on art, music, and dance. They're social dance, swing, Tejano swing, country blues, salsa, tango. And they just also, the project summary is a little unclear, so I apologize. My explanation of it, but mainly like by looking at their website, which I also have up here, so I don't have to go back and forth for my notes. I appreciate that they're programming, they're incorporating people from diverse communities, but it doesn't look like the cultural power is operated by people from those communities. So that was one of my concerns in the application, and it doesn't seem like their organization. It doesn't seem like the concept of community is embedded in the DNA of the organization. It seems like it's a place that just presents art. And sometimes we do this, and sometimes we do this, and sometimes we do this, which is great. But I really would like to see more intention to process, attention to process in their presentation as well as their engagement. They didn't really address certain questions like intersectionality, and how they approach leadership. And let me just pull up my spreadsheet again. But I mean, that's where I am with the organization. And maybe if the second reader would like to go by a pull up, that would be appreciated.
There was a duality to this Art 84 because it was very intriguing that they are merging art, dance, and music, but then also adding the technology and new medium aspect, which is very fascinating, something that needs to be done, something that cutting edge, so to speak. We support our opera, but this is, a technology infusing into 3 different collaborative arts at the same time. So that's very, very intriguing, and it drew me in. What they needed is, a program. They're brand new. They haven't done anything, so they have no demonstrable product or any evidence. I talked to the owner because I was like, okay, here's what you're proposing. What do you got? And so he wrote back and said, yes, in the application, they're saying we haven't done this yet. So there's no, deceit there, but the concept was just fascinating. They need, to demonstrate that there is intersectionality, that there is, inclusiveness. They need to specifically cite that. Again, they're brand new, so they need to demonstrate that in this regard. So as I said, I had a duality of excitement, but then you're missing the essence of this particular essence of this grant.
Okay. Emily, is there anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, I mean, I found my notes and figured out how to access this. So, I mean, like in the cultural leadership notes, it says they state that our artists are the ultimate voice of our organization and no important decision is made without them. Then that's all I know. So, I mean, my response is like, then tell us who the artists are that are influencing the decisions, because right now it looks like the decision making doesn't reflect the community. I agree about the AI stuff. It was really exciting, but nothing on the website. Like I couldn't find anything of how that work was happening. The Elevate community voice, they don't explain how equity is part of the decision making. They don't touch on intersectionality. They have partnered with Art from the Streets and the Neil Cochran House Museum. They didn't mention anyone else, but they also didn't explain their process of partnering, which I think is important. But yeah, that's where I am with that organization. Those were my notes.
Okay. Any other comments, thoughts on this application?
Seeing as there are no additional comments from the panel, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Richard, Lee, Vale, Sarah, Emily, and Taylor. All right, next application up for review is River City Pops. Emily and Lee are our primary and secondary. And Emily, whenever you're ready to begin.
River City Pops is seeking funding to support their 40th anniversary season. They are a show choir. They want to stage a production that honors their organization's storied history as the premier show choir, invite alumni to perform alongside current members, and highlight songs from River City Pops and Austin's history over the last 4 decades. In addition to community performances, this main stage show will allow them to connect with community members while providing meaningful employment for their artists. This was also a grant that just sat in a gray area with me. I know that everybody loves show choir. I know it means a lot. I watched the show Glee. And I've worked with a lot of young people over the decades that, they love it. Once again, like, this has come up through the whole day, like, does this represent what this grant is all about, and combating the cultural erasure of Austin? So I'm kind of, it was well written. It seems like they're in a position where they're working towards being more equitable and inclusive. I just don't see the cultural language of show choir being something at risk of extinction. So, I mean, that's where I am with that. I kind of feel in a gray area.
Yeah,
Thank
I hear you, Emily. I thought that I was excited to hear, yes, like you said, folks love show choir. It's super fun. And it seems like it is really central to their mission to be bringing like music to various communities and making it very affordable. And they talk about accessibility a lot, I think, in terms of, I think we're really talking about like economic accessibility. So I thought there's definitely merit to that, generally speaking. And I also I read them talk a lot about diverse communities, diverse families in these very like general terms. And I was hoping with this grant and the like emphasis of this grant to see a lot more specificity of like what that meant or why that was important to them, how they were integrating that into their performance work or their outreach, etc. So I did appreciate that on their, maybe it was either in the cultural leadership or it was in the intersectionality question, but they reference having a diversity, equity, inclusion chair. So again, it seems like there's some interest in this work, and right now it seems like they're still at a stage that seems pretty broad and vague, and I think that's not what this particular grant is inviting, particularly if we're talking about cultural displacement and erasure. Like this, musical theater could be, or show choir could be used to work against cultural erasure. I just didn't hear them describe their work in that way. So yeah, it left me also in a little bit of a gray area, and with lots of ratings that I was like, well, these could be high, and I'm not sure if this is the spirit of what this grant is meaning to fund.
I just wanted to point out one other thing with language. As somebody who works in youth programming, like the organization would say, we want something for families. And sometimes when other, families look very different. There's also a lot of young people without families. And, I mean, I know it's a conversation not in the arts field a lot, but like I kept on like it kept on sticking with me in this grant. Like, could it be families and caretakers and or something? But I don't know. I just kept on thinking about that. And I just like as the organization moves on towards equity and all organizations serving youth, like how do we focus, how do we think about that word and think about all the people who take care of the babies, you know?
Awesome. Other thoughts? Or really at the end of the day? Go ahead.
I just kind of to echo something that Lee said, I appreciated seeing that they have some leadership that identifies as BIPOC and LGBTQIA. And I appreciate their efforts in diversifying their membership. But I think what was like a sticking point to me is that it was unclear whether like the voices of people from those communities are actually being centered in like the art and the work that they're presenting to the larger Austin community.
Any others?
I had one quick note that I was flipping through my notes here. I think this is the application where when they were talking about leadership and their goals for working on that area, that they mentioned sort of they mentioned some specifics, and a lot of us are saying that the specifics have helped us, but what it felt like is like a quota system, and I just wanted to put out there to the applicant that that can be problematic, and to maybe read more about why off this call, because we're not getting into that discussion perhaps right now, but that's what it sounded like, that in their goals they were saying we want one of this person and one of this person, things like that. And that yeah.
Right. A few more minutes. Folks have any other reflections?
And just to reiterate, the panelists know this, but maybe a little reminder for them and for the applicants to know, we are asking the panelists to give constructive criticism and feedback that could help strengthen future applications, specifically in how they answer the review criteria. And we are asking the panelists to use whatever area of expertise that they're bringing in, that they're knowledgeable about in making those comments. With that being said, I know, it's a bit of applications. That's why I wait a little bit at the end, make sure, you're looking through your notes. If you have any new comments to add, because again, we're asking panelists not to repeat comments that have already been made. But if there are no additional comments for this application, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Sarah, Taylor, Richard, Vale, Lee, and Emily. All right, next application up for review is Music Memories Austin. Sarah and Emily are our primary and secondary. And Sarah, whenever you're ready to begin.
Okay. Music Memories Austin empowers those impacted by Alzheimer's disease, cognitive impairment, and other forms of dementia and aging to engage in vibrant communities of support through shared music and storytelling. And I believe their support is kind of general. Oh no, there's a project, Love Notes Chorus is what their funding ask is for. And I'm trying to look at specific questions in the application areas to give some feedback on improvement. It's very important work, and I think I'm not in the medical field, but I know there's been a lot of studies of music specifically really helping Alzheimer's patients. So I appreciate the work they're doing. But as for this grant opportunity, I don't think that their mission is geared towards the certain communities that we're focusing on. And then they did give a lot of information about the specific board members and their backgrounds, but I'm unsure of kind of additional demographic information, and that's not listed on their website. And I'm not trying to assume anything by photos on their website or names or anything like that, but I just wanted a little more proof of that, because as we know, in the leadership part of this grant and decision-making process, that the board of directors makes a difference, and starting there with diversity and inclusion. And intersectionality was not necessarily shown in the sense that we're looking at with this grant. And then I believe also on accessibility, there was not much language accessibility in the programming. So I took some points off for that in my scoring, and feel like there's room for improvement if they're looking to these types of grant opportunities.
Thank you, Sarah. Before we move on to the secondary, just a reminder more for the applicant, but also for the panelists, that board demographic information was provided by the applicants, but it's only visible to the Economic Development Department as part of our data collection process. It's not visible to the panelists, as we are not scoring on immutable characteristics, but it can be helpful. And if the applicant, don't want to speak for the applicant, but if they may have felt that they had provided that information and did not know that it was not visible to you. With that being said, so keep that in mind with your scoring, but still good comments for the applicant. Secondary, Emily.
I don't know if I'm going to articulate this in the right way, but I'm going to try. I really appreciate the work. It's really important work, and as Sarah said, studies that show like this is arts and music are vital for people with aging brains. I do feel that you can approach this work through an intersectional lens, and I would like to see this organization do that, because not everyone has the same access to the same care as they age. I'd like to, let me pull up my notes for a second. I put in the notes, I'd like to see like work on building a more culturally diverse board. It seems that you guys are building relationships in the community to reach more diverse participants. And that as you do that, to do it in a slow and intentional way. But yeah, I mean, it's another application that's kind of in the gray area. And so, it's good work. I just don't know if it's good work for this grant.
Okay. Any others? Thoughts, comments on this application?
well, panelists are seeing if they have additional comments. Just so the applicants are aware, we have asked the panelists not to compare one application to another. So they are scoring each application individually based on how it meets the review criteria of the Elevate grant. So just wanted to make sure that that was clear. Any additional, oh, Vale, I'm sorry. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I just had one small note myself that I noticed in regards to intersectionality. There was like I thought a really helpful part in the application that actually wasn't under the intersectionality section, but it was under the community voice section that kind of talked about a participant who has found this to be a space where they can really address their dementia and also their sexual orientation there together. So I think maybe there is some intersectionality happening that could have been elaborated on more within this application, because I found that little tidbit really helpful for me.
Thank you for that, Vale. We have also advised the panel to look beyond grantsmanship to the extent possible, and if they find something in, possibly in a different area, but it still answers the question, to take that into consideration when they're scoring. So just keep that, a reminder for to let the applicants know that, and a reminder for the panelists as well, if, there may be something that is related to that in a different section. If you hadn't noticed that before, just keep that in mind as you're finalizing your scores. Any additional comments from the panel? And what was just being said, if you need a little bit more time to finalize your scores, that's fine. But if you would go ahead and do so and let me know when you have finalized your scores, please. Taylor, Sarah, oh, Lee, yes. Vale, Emily, and Richard, you have a question? You need some time. Okay.
No, I'm fine.
You're fine. Okay, you finished. Okay, so that application is, scores have been finalized. We will move on to our final application for the day. Austin Civic Wind Ensemble. Taylor and Emily are our primary and secondary. And Taylor, whenever you're ready to begin.
Bear with me as I slowly start to brain turn to mush. So Austin Civic Wind Ensemble is a civic music group that operates on a membership-based musician membership. They are looking to provide free concerts throughout the year, and their genres range from classic to contemporary band music, so kind of a wide variety of genres. They're going to be putting on 4 holiday concerts, including a performance of the Zilker tree lighting ceremony, 3 to 4 Independence Day concerts as well. And they also host the 17th annual Texas Community Music Festival in April. This group has been operating for a very long time. I really like to see that they had a lot of ties to the Austin community at large. Their application made a lot of notes of playing at a variety of venues in an attempt to increase the amount of people, their audience, right? To increase their the makeup of their audience. Overall, I felt like they could have been stronger in specifying a key constituency group that experience cultural erasure and displacement. Sorry, my brain is not working right now. Let me just open my
Reason on me.
Okay, so what I noticed, what stood out to me particularly is that the musicians in their group pay a membership fee to perform with them. That's kind of how they're able to, I believe, provide a lot of the free programming that they have. They waive that in an attempt to be sort of economically inclusive, without really diving into the intersectionality of the either musicians that they're looking to work with in a specific way, or the kinds of content that they're looking to perform, just a general kind of like all across the board, anything and everything. And then that kind of was strengthened by the fact that their budget isn't paying their musicians, it's going to their artistic director and sort of this sort of leadership. They said non-administrative, but sort of that kind of leadership, creative leadership is what a lot of their budget is going to, and to renting out venues. So yeah, another kind of gray area application. Great work, been doing it for a long time. Long ties to Austin, but might not fall within the key constituency groups that we want to support or through this grant.
Just another couple of things to add. Like, I really appreciate all of these music groups making an effort to diversify the programming, the musical selections, and going into different communities. I really appreciate that. But then when I, and I don't know if this is like inequitable practice, but then when you go to your site and you go and you look at who's performing on the stage, who is performing on the stage does not look like that community. And so that just like causes internal friction for me about like how do you keep on, because I know they're trying to do the work. I can tell that they're trying to do the work. There's just a lot of work to do. So I mean, my question is just, how do you focus on diversifying your performers? Everything else, so yeah, that's what I wanted to add to that.
All right. Last one for today. Any more thoughts?
Well, being a musician and these type of instruments, you don't get many chances to play. There's not many, stages. These aren't easy instruments. And if you take away these type of venues, you take away, already the limited spots they get to play anyway. So, I want to make sure we recognize, that these poor guys and girls and, want to continue to play these very instruments that they may not get to play, hardly ever. So these types of organizations help preserve at least that type of instrumentation. So I think we need to recognize that for this group.
I just made a quick note, and I think it is sort of slightly repeating what some others said, but trying not to quote applications, because I don't think any of this process should be about exactly the words that they use and things, but words matter in this work a lot. And this was one of the applications where I saw phrases like, "We welcome all walks of life," or "we have open doors," and things like that. And I just, I agree with my fellow panelists that they're working towards the things that this grant opportunity is trying to achieve and is targeting, but they're not, they're on the first step of it. And they're not diving in. And there's nothing wrong with using phrases like that, but it's this surface, maybe a surface level. I just say that, but
Go ahead, Dale.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think it was brought up earlier how they're playing in different locations to diversify their audiences. But from the information that was presented to me, it was unclear if they're really diversifying their repertoire as well to reflect those communities. It seemed very focused on a very like Western Eurocentric wind ensemble repertoire from what I saw, which is not necessarily like amplifying voices of diverse artists with the repertoire they're choosing.
3 minutes. Final thoughts?
If there are no further comments from the panel, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Richard and Taylor, Sarah, Vale, Emily, and Lee. All right, and that concludes day one of Organization Panel 3. We will stop the recording.